Hello everybody, welcome to today's interview for International Women's Day. My name is Michelle Reynolds and I am the Women's Officer for Bectu's new unscripted branch division, and it's my absolute pleasure today to interview Philippa Childs, head of Bectu, who's also been looking after us unscripted lot recently, which has been really nice. And we thought that it would be good to kind of find out really from the woman in charge about, you know, what Bectu is all about, you know, what we're looking at in the year coming up and what we've been through the year before from a woman's perspective. So thank you for joining us, Philippa.
Thank you for inviting me, Michelle.
Oh, I'm really chuffed. I mean, I guess I kind of wanted to start because I'm quite new to the union and new to Bectu, although my background is obviously I worked for 17 years in TV. But I wanted to know about how you got involved in Bectu and sort of unionism, what your roles are. You know, how did it all start for you?
Yeah, so I suppose I come from a sort of family of strong women, I suppose, and particularly my grandmother was a huge influence on me. So she, when I was a teenager, she took me on the People's March for Jobs, and she took me to Greenham Common and all of those sorts of things. So I suppose she was my main influence for sure. And when I was about 19, I moved to London because that was in the days of Thatcher, and I lived in the northeast, and jobs were few and far between. And so I came to London to see if the streets were paved with gold, which indeed they weren't, and ended up working in the civil service in the centre of London. And you know, it was just a thing that I was always going to do, was to join the union on the first day. And I did that, and I very soon became an activist in the union. And I'm sure it had something to do with the fact that in those days, I think my job was filing, like physical filing and things like that. So it was a fairly boring job, I think, in those days. So I think that's what drew me to what seemed to be where all the life was at, which was in the union. There was a really good social scene, and you know, a young crowd. And yeah, so I really came from being a branch activist when I worked in the civil service. And then I think when I was about 29, I applied for my first union role and was very happy that I was successful in my first application. So I worked in a union which was largely organised in the civil service in those days, and it all started from there.
And then, so what drew you to how did you arrive at Bectu, where you're kind of dealing with all of us crazy bunch?
Yeah, so I think I always liked moving around and dealing with different groups of members, and I actually did change unions in the year 2000. So I worked in that union. I went off and worked with the TUC for a little while in their education centre, and then I went back to my existing union, and then I joined one of the predecessors of Prospect, which is Bectu's parent union, in 2000. And it coincided with me, I had 2 young children at that stage, and it coincided with me moving out of London. So I applied for a job which was outside of London, and moved out for a few years with them. So it wasn't until, when was it? Bectu and Prospect merged in 2017, that I had the opportunity to join the new Bectu sector, and took that opportunity to come back to the southeast and work again in London. So yeah, and that's how I found myself in not in this position. Actually, I was working then with BT and digital. But when Jerry Morrissey decided to retire, I applied for the role and was successful.
Well, I'm so pleased, because I think, you know, we feel your passion coming through really strongly for the arts, for theatre. We saw you out with the pantomime dames last year, and for TV. So you're definitely one of us, because you're over now. Let me get this right. You're over 5 divisions of Bectu. So that's the BBC London Production Division, Regional Production Division, Independent Broadcasting, Arts and Entertainment, but you're still also Communications and Digital. So that's like 30,000 people you're looking at. How are you finding the time? And I also wanted to sort of see, one of the questions I wanted to have is sort of, are the issues that women are facing in all those different divisions, is there a common theme? Are there, similar things that you're kind of hearing from everybody?
I think so. I mean, obviously, the last year has been difficult for everyone, but undoubtedly it's been difficult for people who work across the creative industries. And unfortunately, it's probably true to say that women have had to face the biggest challenges of all, because of the balancing homeschooling and those sorts of things with trying to work as well, or being out of work, or not having any financial support. I mean, it has been just huge.
It's been a real sort of triple whammy, I think. Not only have the arts and media been really badly hit, but also we have mostly freelancers, and then it's also quite a women heavy industries, I think.
It really is. It has been an incredibly difficult time for people, I think. I mean, so different parts of the industry, I suppose, probably have more women than perhaps others, but certainly I think one of the things that I really wanted to do when I took up this role was to make sure that the union was diverse, to make sure that we were representing all of our members, and that includes obviously women. And I just had quite a strong feeling. I've always had this actually about trade unions, that it's there might be a tendency to focus on pay and terms and conditions, and people perhaps sometimes forget all of those work-life balance challenges, all of those sorts of softer, I suppose, issues, but I think actually have a bigger impact on working life. Certainly in my experience, they certainly did have a bigger impact on my working life than perhaps some of the other the more sort of pay general terms and conditions type issues, I guess.
Absolutely. And I think those sort of work-life balance issues, obviously it's something that I, in my other hat as share my Telly job, it's something that I'm very passionate about, but I think it's kind of come into kind of sharp relief over the last year, where suddenly people do have more commitments, caring commitments. I think also being away from work has kind of made people sort of prioritize a little bit more. What do I want out of my life? Is it just about work? Is it about more? So yeah, I think it's something that's really important, and I'm glad that you're seeing that as well.
Absolutely.
And now I wanted to ask, so you're the first woman to hold the role of head of Bectu, and Christine Bond was the first woman president of Bectu, and she only retired from there a few years ago. Why, there's quite a strong history of female activism in Bectu. Why has it taken so long for us to have you?
So I think, I've got to be perfectly honest and say that I'm not sure that trade unions more generally have a great history of electing women to senior positions or appointing women to senior positions. And I think that probably does go back to the sorts of things we talked about. So much of trade unionism, I think, has happened in the pub or, out of hours, networking and so on. And certainly, for me, being perfectly honest with you, in the period of time between when I had my children and when they went off to university, I just balancing work and their needs was enough for me, and I couldn't even contemplate during that period of time trying to progress or get promoted. And so it literally has been since they went off to university that I have really focused on my career, I think, and been able, and been in a position to think, well, actually, no, this is my time, and I'm going to focus on this, and this is something I really want to do. And I just think this is something that lots of women face throughout their career, and we all make choices, and we all have to sort of live with those choices. So more generally, I think being a trade union activist, and certainly in terms of pushing yourself to the senior levels of the union, I think it's something that's come easily and naturally to men, and not so easily to women, unfortunately.
Really interesting. I think I'm going to come back to that, I think, because I was sort of looking through kind of a bit of a history about women and unions and women in Bectu. Actually, there's a really good book that Rowan, my colleague, lent me, and I was going through and looking at what the kind of campaigns were and that kind of thing. And during the early noughties, do we call them noughties? Early 2000s, the Women's Conference, they included campaigns on sexual harassment at work and work-life balance, and it was kind of dispiriting for me to read that. I was thinking, God, 20 years on, and we're banging on about the same thing.
About the same things, yeah.
But it does feel, I don't know, with Me Too, and now with obviously COVID bringing the fact that we can work at home and things like that, it does feel like now there is a momentum building. Is this the year that we finally get a result on that these campaigns come through?
I really hope so. I mean, I was at your branch meeting the other day, actually, and I don't know if you noticed this, I was looking at the screen. I actually took a sneaky photo because the unscripted branch is just doing such great work, and I think it's partly because you all are natural campaigners anyway and involved in other things. But I had a look at the screen, and there was such diversity on there that it really made me feel, yes, that is the union that I want to lead. That is the union that I want to see, because I am very passionate about changing the industry's diversity and making sure that everyone feels that the union is a place for them, and that the union is addressing the challenges that they face. And I do think that we've got a long way to go in that. Not just Bectu, but the trade union movement more generally has got a long way to go to really gain the confidence of all of the workforce that actually we're there for them, and we're not just there for white men, basically.
Yeah, because I mean, when I was hearing you talking about when you were starting in the unions, you were saying it was really young, and it was where the action was, and it was kind of dynamic. And I think maybe it's lost its way a little bit. I think sort of stereotypically you think, particularly for Bectu, as being for crew, when it comes from a TV background, it's for crew, which tends to be for men, and so I think especially with unscripted, but I think in general Bectu should be opening up to be more open to women, and also to young people coming in. It should be the thing you do is to join the union. What can Bectu do to make it more inviting, I suppose, to a more diverse group?
Well, I think, making sure that we, in everything that we do and say, and all of the literature that we put out, to make sure that we are showing a variety of people, I think is really important, because I do think the old adage about you can only be what you can see is really important. I certainly want to see our organisers and our officials being more diverse than we have been perhaps in the past, and I I do want us. I do want us to make sure that we're relevant, that we are fun as
Yeah.
well.
I
That
mean,
we
we have a
are
ball, I have to say. I love our gang.
yeah, definitely.
And I think it's, for me, so I joined Bectu last year, and after a long time in TV, and I think it seemed like now, if you're going to join the union, now is the time. It's particularly tough. COVID has really been particularly tough for freelancers. And it seems like now more than ever, we need the backup of a union, wouldn't you think?
Absolutely. I mean, we're just we're coming up to a year, aren't we, since the first lockdown, and it has been such a challenging time for so many of our members in the industry. It's been a extremely busy time for the union, but it's also been it's felt like a really good and positive time for us to be able to really demonstrate our worth, and to make sure that we are talking about the things that our members want us to be talking about. So we're just about to actually launch a survey to ask members about their experiences over the last year, what the impact has been on them, how are they managing to get back to work, and if so, has that been a positive experience for them, and what they want to see change, I suppose, going forward. Because I think we've all sort of pledged to make sure that things change for the future, and I really want to make sure that happens.
Absolutely. Was it build back better, or whatever they're calling it now? But I think that's right, and I think from what we're hearing on the ground, is that people are either haven't had any work and obviously have had no support, or if they are working, it seems like, because the channels and the indies have also been struggling, but it seems to be the freelancers that are carrying the burden. So they're the ones that are working on buyout contracts. They're the ones that are working crazy long hours to fit that tight turnaround schedule. It's tighter than ever in that rush to build content, or, for lower budgets than ever before. What support or protection can the union give our freelancers who are feeling like they have to work, but they're under these terrible conditions?
Yeah, I mean, ultimately, as with all things, where with union organising, the strength is in numbers. So the more members we have, obviously, the more strength we have to be able to talk to PACT and to talk to the indies about, and the broadcasters about, how their freelancers are treated. It was various points through the pandemic, and particularly initially when everything closed down, everyone was talking. The broadcasters were talking about it, PACT were talking about it, the indies were talking about how, what a devastating impact there'd been on freelancers, and how they had to be treated better going forward. And so, a few short months later, we're in a situation where, as you say, freelancers are being asked to carry much of the burden. So I think we need to, and we've sort of started to have those conversations, haven't we, through the Coalition for Change. But ultimately, I would like to see us have an agreement that we negotiate through PACT to cover unscripted in the same way as we have on continuing drama and high-end film and TV.
Yes, so tell me about that, because basically you organise a sort of an agreement for drama, right? And what does that exactly involve?
So it's not about pay rates or anything like that, but it is about working conditions when people are on set. So things like hours and meal breaks, all of those sorts of things, and they are really important because it does set a framework for how people work, and there are always issues, and things could always be better, and the agreements are always under constant review. But they're really useful, not least in trying to address some of the long hours culture in the industry, which undoubtedly is a huge contributor to problems around stress and mental health, I think.
Absolutely. I know, obviously I'm part of the unscripted committee, and I think we might be the first have a flexible working officer. Natalie Grant is our flexible working officer, and we're working with the WEC to do a sort of wider campaign about work-life balance and looking at hours and things like that. Is that something that you can see other branches of Bectu embracing?
Most definitely. I think it's long overdue, actually, and there's a tendency. There's always been a tendency, hasn't there, to because it's it takes some thinking about, and it takes some dynamism and actually agility to be able to think about flexible working and to make it work. So I think the tendency within the industry has been, oh no, it's too complicated, we can't make it work, and really not thinking about actually the experience in most places is that if you are flexible with your workforce, if you do give people the opportunity to work the hours that fit around their lives, then you get more out of them. You get absolutely better productivity, and certainly more goodwill, for sure.
Absolutely. So yeah, we'll have that campaign. We're going to work on that this year. But I wanted to ask you, are there any other kind of current or upcoming campaigns that you're particularly excited about this year? What have we got coming up along the tracks?
So just before the pandemic hit, there were a couple of things on our agenda, and I think it was in November 2019 we launched our Dignity at Work campaign, which was really a broad campaign, which we sort of wanted to see work across all of the creative industry. So all of the divisions that you listed earlier on, whether people work in theatre, whether they work in the BBC, or whether they work in film and television, we were very conscious of some of the issues around mental health, around stress, around bullying and harassment, contractual challenges, all of those things, I suppose, long hours. And we wanted to, the idea of the campaign was, I suppose, to set a benchmark of expected behaviours at work across all of those industries, and we literally launched it before Christmas, and we're planning on doing much of that work during 2020. But of course, like everything, it went out of the window, unfortunately. So one of the things I certainly want to do in this year, because there have been so many issues that have arisen through the pandemic, and just now so many stories coming out around bad behaviour and bullying and harassment, that I really want to go back to that campaign and flesh it out a bit, and see if we can give that some impetus in this year. And then the other big campaign, and again we were talking about this at the point at which we went into lockdown, I mean, I think Bectu has always been committed to the principle of public service broadcasting, and we've been very, we were very concerned at some of the messages that were coming out of the Johnson government initially about the future of the BBC. So I think we also will be throughout the year highlighting, how important public service broadcasting is, and actually how lucky we are to have. Not perfect. The BBC is not perfect by any stretch of the imagination, but there's a lot of complaints, and people moan about the news and all the rest of it, but the BBC does so much more, and does drama brilliantly, children's TV, radio.
As a homeschooling mum, I am God bless the BBC Bite Size and their homeschooling stuff, which is just about keeping us sane.
Absolutely.
That's great. And I think the stuff that we've been doing about unseen on screen with the bullying will obviously feed into your kind of campaign there with the Dignity at Work. And
most definitely, that's been a great campaign.
Yeah, I mean, obviously horrifying to hear all the accounts, but great to feel that there was a place people could go, I think, and hopefully it'll deter future bad behaviour a little. I mean, as you said, there are lots in our group. There's a lot of women in our team, and there does seem to be a I mean, over lockdown, there was a real kind of swell of grassroots activism, but I think especially a lot of women coming forwards, I found, which is really exciting, people doing some really powerful work. But I wanted to ask you what you see are kind of the barriers to women-led activism. I mean, do we need to get the blokes involved? How do we get the message about women's issues to the change makers, which unfortunately at the moment still seem to be mostly men? How do we get the message through?
So I think one of the things that is really important about women's activism and is a real strength actually is the way that we tend to do things, the way we tend to work, which is I think in a much more collaborative, positive, trying to bring people along on a journey rather than hitting people over the head with an issue. So I think that's the way that we do it, and that we remember that we do have as much right as everyone else to be in the room and to be talking and to be saying what's important to us. And the more women step forward in terms of union activism, and the more women that are involved at all levels of the union movement, I think that can only be a good and positive thing. I love working with lots of women. Women tend to be, on the whole, don't they, quite very supportive and non-judgmental, I think. So it's certainly one of my ambitions has been to encourage and empower women, I suppose, within the union.
Yeah, so that's, I mean, if we want those, if we want those women's issues and campaigns to come across really strongly, we need women to join the union as well. We need that groundswell of numbers to kind of join. I wanted to come. So obviously we're doing this on International Women's Day, and this year the theme is choose to challenge, which I quite like. But I wanted to sort of see what that meant for you, this idea of choosing to challenge for International Women's Day.
Yeah, that's an interesting question, isn't it? So for me, if you still look around the trade union movement, it's still very male dominated, and I think that's a matter of regret for me, to be honest. I can think of great women trade unionists over the years, but I still don't think we're at a point where there are enough women in senior positions. And to be perfectly honest, if I look across the industry, I think probably the senior positions are still pretty male dominated. Look at the BBC, for example, never had a woman DG. So I think we need to, we'll do it in our own way, and we will undoubtedly try to collaborate to make change. But I think we still need to be saying that there are still mountains to climb, and we still need to make sure that that there are no glass ceilings anymore in the future, and that equal pay is something which is seen to be an automatic right rather than something we have to fight for.
Absolutely. I mean, I was looking back at, I was reading about, doing a bit of homework and reading about Christine Bond, and she said how much she loved her time at Bectu, and she really kind of, she really championed like the women's conference and that kind of thing. But it was striking to me that one of the reasons she stepped down was talking about her caring commitments, and that is still a factor even when you reach those great heights. So I suppose I'm kind of coming back to this idea of kind of working in a different way that allows people to retain and progress their career, no matter what their other commitments are. It shouldn't hamper it, or we should find a way of making allowances to let brilliant women rise and stay at the top.
Most definitely. And I guess if there is one thing that has been positive out of the pandemic, it has been the fact that we are thinking about how we work differently, and that things like being able to talk to people over a screen instead of always necessarily having to be in a room will make a huge difference. It does allow people the opportunity to manage their home life against their work life, and I suppose it does create a bit of a level playing field, doesn't it? Because if you're you want to be involved in something and you're at the other end of the country and you've got caring commitments, then you can still do it if it's over a screen. Or if you want to, we've put almost all of our reps training online now, and no doubt that was a barrier before because it involved traveling to London to go on a training course, to stay overnight, to and not everybody is able to or wants to do that. So I think thinking differently about the world of work will provide opportunities for women, and will provide potentially more of a level playing field for sure.
I hope so. I very much hope so. I was going to keep going, but I think that sounds like a good place to stop. I think that's a really lovely final message, and I think you're right. I think ironically, I think I feel more connected to my fellow freelancers in this time of no work than I ever have during my whole career. The fact that we can talk this way from our own homes and be invited into each other's homes and see each other's kids dashing around the background, or dogs or whatever. It's sort of broken down an awful lot of barriers, and I hope it continues to break down barriers.
I really imagine for freelancers it has been an absolute boon to be able to do that, because I think what has come out over to me loud and clear is that people have felt quite isolated and dealing with difficult issues on their own at work, and that actually if there is another positive to come out of the pandemic, it is that more and more freelancers are looking at how they can actually join together to address the challenges they have at work. So that's a really positive thing, I think.
Absolutely. So let's keep it going out the other side of the lockdown, when we can see each other in real life. And I'm very much looking forward to meeting you in real life and having a drink one day.
Most definitely.
Oh my goodness. But let's continue to keep supporting each other as women, as freelancers. It can only mean a better industry, I think.
I agree.
So Philippa Childs, thank you so much for joining me today. And I look forward to seeing you soon in real life.
Thanks, Michelle. Me too.
Thank you. Bye.